In this lesson, we'll talk about three different kinds of polygons: quads, triangles, and n-gons. We'll talk about which ones that we want to use and in what ratios in order to be Checkmate compliant with our models. So first, let's look at the Checkmate Pro specs, and I'm just going to come down to section 2 here, standards, and then 2.1's geometry, 2.2's topology, which we'll look at. 2.2.1 says quads and triangles only. So right off the bat, that eliminates the n-gons, and n-gons are anything with 5 or more sides. We'll look at that in a second, but you're probably aware of what an n-gon is. We don't want to have any of those. Okay, we want to stick with quads and triangles only in our geometry. And in fact, looking at 2.2.2, we want to stick with mostly quads. Now, it does give you a range of between 10 and 20% of triangles. I think that's actually very generous. If you're really trying to make your model with only quads, I think that that'll be plenty if you have to have some triangles. I think you can certainly get away with less than that, but you do have some leeway there, so you're able to have some triangles in your geometry. Now, if you're working with something that's meant for real-time application, you can have more triangles. You don't have to stick to that 10 to 20%. And we'll talk a little bit more later about the separation between the subdividable geometry versus the real-time geometry and what the distinctions are between those. But for the most part, if it's going to be subdivided, if it's not going to be a real-time application, mostly quads, 10 to 20% triangles, sort of okay. Real-time model, you can have a higher percentage of triangles. So let's jump into 3ds Max and see how we can kind of find out where the geometry is. Now, I'm sure you probably know what all these terms are, but just as a refresher, obviously triangle, smallest possible polygon with 3 sides. Quad has 4 sides. That's what we want to stick with most of the time. This one on top is actually, it looks like a quad from the top, but it's actually an n-gon because it has an edge that terminates on the side. You know, and sometimes this is where you actually find the n-gons where maybe an edge loop for some reason didn't go all the way through, and so it's left an n-gon somewhere. And so we want to be able to find those and get rid of them. So let's take a look at this fish example. So at first glance, it looks pretty good as far as the edge flow, and it's got a lot of quads here, nice grid, nice clean grid on the side, making up the side of this fish. But let's say we want to just make sure. It's kind of hard to tell just by looking if there are any n-gons or triangles in this mesh. So what can we do here? Let's select it, and we'll go to Polygon. And I want to turn on the selection ribbon up at the top. And if you've minimized, you can go ahead and maximize that and go to the selection tab. We're going to concentrate on the left-hand side of the ribbon and also the far right-hand side of the ribbon. So on the left side, you'll see there's a button for non-quads. So because we talked about the 3 different kinds, anything that's not a quad is going to be either triangle or an n-gon. So if you want to select those, select non-quads, and then we can go to wireframe. And you can see that those polygons have been highlighted in red. Okay, so you can see those there. Now you're able to go in and fix those if you need to by adding an edge, which we'll look at in a second. Let's look at the second way, though, to find an n-gon or a triangle. Let's select I'm going to select the back of this back fin and go back to polygon mode. Back to selection, we're going to go to the far right-hand side, and you can see there's an equal, less than, and greater than sign, and then a number of sides and a little arrow. So this will allow us to select polygons based on their sides. So if we know that we want to select all the n-gons that have 7 sides, we could say 7 and then say equals and select this, and it would select all the 7-sided polygons if there are any. What we want to do, though, is have some flexibility here in selecting triangles or n-gons. And so if I choose 4, then I can select all of the different kinds of polygons based on just whatever symbol I have. So if I say equal, I can select all the quads. If I say less than, I can select only triangles. And if I say greater than, I can select only n-gons. So that's what I want to do, because those are the ones that we really, really want to fix. So let's say greater than 4, select. And you can see that it's actually selected this polygon up at the top here. So let's go to shaded. And in this case, the n-gon simply results from kind of what we talked about, a loop for some reason not completing the loop. So it's not going all the way across, okay? So you can see there's kind of an edge right in here. So what we want to do is complete that loop going across there. So I'm just going to use cut. I'm going to start at this point, kind of come across there to that edge, and then complete it over on this side. So now let's take a look. You can see when I select n-gons, it's not selecting that anymore, so we're able to fix that up. So that is, those are a couple of ways that you can find the n-gons and the triangles in your geometry. You might also want to see the number of polygons that you are using. And so there's a few ways to be able to do that. If you hit the 7 key, you can bring up the stats showing the number of polygons that you have here. You can also customize the stats that you're seeing. You can go up to View and Viewport Configuration, and under Statistics, you can choose to see any of this, this information that you have here. We can apply that, and you can see how many polygons versus how many triangles that you have right in that sort of heads-up display. Okay, and you can turn that off and on by hitting the 7 key. You can also go into Utilities, and let's go to More and choose the polygon counter. And let's bring this up, and this will allow us to take a look at the polygons. And you can see I can go by selected object, and you can set a budget as well, which is kind of cool if you're trying to stay within a polygon budget, and it'll tell you kind of how much of that's taking it up, and it'll tell you how many polygons you have, and you can count either the polygons or you can count triangles. Okay, and when we're counting triangles here, we're counting not just the explicit triangles that we've created, but it's actually also, because when it tessellates all this, it's going to tessellate it into triangles, so it's actually counting those as well. Okay, so keep that in mind, because you can see here we have the number of polygons for this body, 10,726, and then if we count the triangles, 21,460. Well, that's about double what this is, so think about 2 triangles per quad. So the main thing to remember is you want to have mostly quads, and you can have some triangles. You want to avoid n-gons, and then also if you're working with something in real time, you can have a few more triangles. You can use the selection ribbon to be able to find any place where you have those n-gons, and then you just want to use cut or your other polygon tools to come in and just draw those across. Now, if you have an n-gon, sometimes the only way to fix that, or maybe you don't have enough time, but you can draw that across and create a quad and a triangle in some cases, and so you're allowed to have some triangles, so that's a better option than having the n-gon for sure. So in the next lesson, we'll take a look at creating clean geometry, so finding mesh errors, things like isolated vertices and reverse normals and things like that, and how we can begin to eliminate those. So we'll talk about that next.